Hi, folks. My name is Jared Ross, and I'm a product architect in Microsoft Security. And I'm excited to talk today about elevating identity security with Entra ID Protection. Let's jump right in. Today, we're going to look at 4 key themes across Entra ID Protection. The first one, the need for modern identity security. Next, what is Entra ID Protection? Third, the power of conditional access in our Zero Trust engine. And fourth, some key resources and next steps to get started. But first, let's agree that the world has changed around us. The idea of a moat and nice protected castle is no longer true. Our world looks somewhat closer to this, with a whole bunch of devices, applications, and people scattered all over the internet. Some things within our control, and others not so much. We're facing a new reality with artificial intelligence, and it's rapidly changing the way that we operate, and with it, the way that we think about security. The number of identities and endpoints is growing exponentially, driven by human and machines. The expansion brings incredible innovation, but also dramatically increases the attack surface. In today's digital landscape, the sheer scale of identities and endpoints is unprecedented. Just consider this. There are already more than 300 billion passwords in use by humans and machines. Every new device, every new user, every new AI agent adds to the complexity and dramatically increases the attack surface for potential threats. This explosion of identities isn't just a statistic. It's a fundamental shift in how organizations must approach security. Each identity represents a possible entry point for attackers. The more identities and endpoints we have, the greater the risk and the harder it becomes to manage and secure access effectively. But let's look at this in reality. These news headlines are jarring in nature. Attackers are moving faster than security teams can react. Hackers are exploiting digital complexity at alarming speed. Cyber threats reach new levels of frequency and impact. And it's all because agents are operating at machine speed. This means that as human attackers have started to adopt AI as an attack surface, an attack mechanism, it means that we have to protect at machine speed as well. IDC research estimates that 1.3 billion AI agents will be at work by 2028. And it's no surprise to any of us that that brings a new cybersecurity challenge that we've never faced before. Agents are a new type of identity. It joins the family of users and apps and devices. And it's the same identity conversation that we've had all along because they take action and access resources. The difference is that agents are a new type of identity because they morph. Sometimes they act on behalf of a user. Sometimes they behave more like an application. And unlike traditional applications, agents are not static because they can acquire new skills as LLM capabilities evolve, which changes what they're able to do over time. This behavior means that agents need to be treated as first-class identities to appropriately manage them. When an agent has an identity, we can start answering basic questions like, what is it? What can it access? And what can it do? But first, we need a single, connected policy framework to protect any identity anywhere. And that brings in our Zero Trust engine, which works across the threat landscape. It works across the identity types, and it works across where our apps and workloads are located today. On the left-hand side, we'll see users, networks, endpoints, and now agents. We'll bring it into our Zero Trust engine, where we're doing things like continuous risk assessment and automation, as well as bringing in threat intelligence and telemetry from across the various Microsoft threat surfaces that exist in the wild today. Once we've made a decision about what it can access, we then will grant access either by stepping up authentication, blocking, or requiring additional information or approval, for example, before we can then go access things like applications, data, infrastructure, and agents. And you'll see on the left-hand and the right-hand side, we've got agents on both because agents can also access other agents or resources or data. And we must protect them at every layer in order to ensure that we have end-to-end protections for our identities, whether or not they're human, non-human, or agents. Microsoft Entra helps you face this dilemma confidently. As the only unified identity and network access solution on the market that fights AI with AI. Plus, the the same infrastructure and AI you use to secure access for people within Microsoft Entra can be extended to secure access to agents as well. Let's jump into Entra ID Protection and get started. Entra ID Protection blocks identity takeover in real time with the power of advanced machine learning. We're able to protect our organization with risk-based access policies feeding into that zero trust conditional access engine that we just talked about. We're able to detect advanced attacks with machine learning and threat intelligence that's being fed constantly. And we're able to respond in real time with SOC insights from both the SIEM and XDR integrations. The advanced detections are running in real time, and they're running in the context of the authentication plane, where Entra is the main IAM provider issuing tokens. This is a really powerful capability because it provides us with a real-time ability to not only detect threats, but also enforce actions in line before a threat can ever make it in to accessing a resource or accessing another agent, for example. This is fundamental to the Entra ID Protection story because this runs at the scale of conditional access. It runs at every authentication request, and we get to make those just-in-time access decisions like stepping up authentication, revoking sessions through our adaptive risk remediation engine, or be able to block it and allow the SOC team to have further investigation capabilities. Let's jump in to protecting your organization with risk-based conditional access, where we'll be able to protect, detect, and respond to threats in real time, but also partner closely with our SOC teams, where we want to be able to make sure that this is a team sport, where the identity and access management teams are partnering closely with our SOC teams so that we can shift left and ensure that we are protecting identity takeover at every point of the threat landscape. Let's take a look at an example of how identity protection works in practice. On the left-hand side, we've got a user who is a director of IT in Quantico, Virginia. The last successful sign-in was 5 hours ago. Because we are the IAM and IDP, or identity provider, that issues the token, we get a tremendous amount of information as part of the login request. You'll see here, we know that it's coming from an iOS device. We know that the client is utilizing modern authentication. And oh yeah, we also notice that they're coming from Naples, Italy now. And there are multiple attempts happening all at the same time. This is concerning to us. Our risk engine is working at every authentication request, as I mentioned before. This is all happening in real time. And we've detected that there are some anomalies in this sign-in. The user traditionally logs in Quantico, Virginia, but all of a sudden we're seeing that in Naples, Italy, and we're seeing multiple sign-in attempts occurring all at the same time. We've now raised the sign-in risk from no risk to medium risk. And as part of my policy, I've defined below, as you can see, that anything that is medium or high risk, I want to allow access, but I want to allow access and require MFA as part of that. The multi-factor authentication is going to stop an overwhelming number of attacks that are simple brute force or attacks that are trying to get the user to approve the MFA. Once we've required MFA and we've gone through those motions, we have enough confidence to now say that that user is really the right user and they're allowed to access Exchange Online. We've put them through a quick interrupt. We've allowed them to be able to quickly go through MFA and be able to be productive in relatively short order, all in real time and all in line of the authentication request before we ever issued the token. We didn't issue the token and then come back later to clean it up. The power of conditional access and risk-based conditional access is that we're able to use the full scale of Microsoft in order to be able to make these real-time detection and enforcement decisions. As we can see on the left-hand side, we can see a slightly different user. We've got the logistics supervisor in the logistics department, and they typically log in to San Diego. But as we move over to the right-hand side, we start to see that some of these values look a little different. On the sign-in risk, we've detected an anomalous token. And through our MDE integration, we've also detected an attempt to access the primary refresh token, or the PRT. This is a multi-layer attack in the sense that we've detected both anomalous traffic as part of sign-in, but we've also detected as part of our endpoint integration that there is malicious activity that may be occurring to access that PRT. This is going to raise our user level risk to high. And specifically within this organization, the organization has made the decision that for any high risk, we're going to block the access. And as part of blocking this access, we've stopped the issuance of token from occurring. And what this has made possible is now in partnership with the SOC, again, because this is a team sport, this means that we've given the SOC the ability to now go investigate and gain all the context about what has already occurred as part of this investigation, and now supplemented with all of the various information from across XDR and from across the rest of the defenders, Purview, etc. This all now comes together in an incident where the SOC team can respond. And once they've made a decision, whether or not the threat has been evicted from the tenant or they need additional investigation, they can allow the sign-in to take place, all without going back to the identity team, and all in a streamlined manner that keeps the user productive as fast as possible, while still ensuring that the organization's security posture has not been decreased. Now let's cover the advanced risk-based conditional access policy design. Risk-based conditional access policies dynamically evaluate user and sign-in risk based on trillions of signals, over 100 trillion to be precise. These policies allow organizations to challenge and block malicious actors in real time. This slide emphasizes the importance of integrating risk insights into conditional access to enhance security while maintaining user convenience. On the left-hand side, we'll see these unique insights powered by trillions of signals. We've got the auto-generated ones, which are happening in real time in the sign-in in authentication context. These are going to be ML-based, heuristic-based detections, and these are detections from other first parties, like the defenders, Purview, etc. We also feed in expert-generated signals, like from our security researchers and dedicated human labelers. These are going to be really good to augment all of the machine learning models that we have, where we have comprehensive threat signals based on nation-state actors, based on active threats against organizations across the world. And because Microsoft is able to look at the full scale of all Microsoft tenants and all users within the Microsoft ecosystem, we're able to get very pointed in how we're able to focus how we enforce action based off of those expert knowledge and expert insights that we've got. And then finally, we've got end user generated input as well. These are going to be built-in feedback loops, for example, where if the SOC or identity teams, for example, report a user as compromised, or they mark a detection as a false positive, we learn from each one of these in the machine learning models, and we improve for the next attack and for the next prevention that needs to occur. Additionally, we have mechanisms in the Microsoft Authenticator app, for example, where I can report suspicious activity. That automatically, if configured in your tenant, will flow natively into Entra ID Protection and therefore will enforce risk-based conditional access decisions. In the middle portion, we assess those risk levels via real-time and offline evaluation engines. These engines work hand in hand so that we have the most comprehensive decision every time a user logs in or every time a session is revoked and they need to be reevaluated in conditional access. We look at three primary vectors: risky users, risky sign-ins, and risky workload identities. Each one of these works in parallel so that we're able to identify session-based attacks, user-based compromise, and identity attacks that are focused on workload access as well. Once we have been able to take in all of the signals, once we've evaluated them as part of the engine, we now want to go implement policy enforcement and unified investigation experiences. We expect that organizations are going to utilize risk-based conditional access policies to allow the best user experience while also still ensuring that we have comprehensive layers of security. A typical sign-in policy, for example, is going to say, for any medium or high risk, I want to be able to require phishing-resistant MFA, like passkeys or FIDO2 keys, in order to clear that risk. Equally, on the user side, I may say, for example, for any high risk, I want to put them through adaptive risk remediation. Adaptive risk remediation is powerful because it allows us to make a point-in-time decision based on the threat, based on the credential or authentication method that were used, and based on the best decision we have for remediation at that point in time. That might be a self-service password reset or self-service password change, or that might be a revoke or revocation of the session. With adaptive risk remediation, it gives us the ability to make pointed decisions on what remediation we're going to take based on the threat and based on the authentication method that's used. If, for example, the threat is against a passwordless credential, we're going to do a revocation of sessions versus triggering a password reset or password change that may not be as applicable to this use case. This information also flows natively into Defender XDR, so the SOC team has the best way of being able to investigate with all the context around us. This also feeds into our attack disruption engine, where if we're not able to prevent an attack in real time, our disruption engine is able to look at more signals across endpoint, identity, data, network, etc., and make informed decisions about what disruptive action we want to take to make sure that we contain, evict the threat from the environment holistically in nature. We also have seamless integrations into Sentinel, and so for long-term retention and for SIEM investigation. And we also support, of course, third-party SIEMs for having this data flow in and build insights off of that. The scale of our detections and alerts protecting against these threats matter. We have over 100 threat scenarios that cover our hybrid identity landscape. And these are constantly being built and added to as new threats emerge within the ecosystem and within the threat landscape. Across the many different vectors, these are used, compounded, and weighted into our unified risk engine that both our prevention engine and disruption engine are able to use in order to make the best possible decision and protect as much account takeover, identity compromise as we possibly can. We have many detections and alerts across many portions of the kill chain, including initial access, persistence, credential access, and collection, and many more coming across the threat landscape. But we can't just talk about human and non-human identities. We have to extend this entire detection framework to agents that are utilizing identity protection. We want to flag agents that are exhibiting unusual behavior and automatically block their access to those resources. We need to do this at machine speed, though, because as I mentioned at the beginning, if we have a large scale number of agents that are operating in the wild, that also means that we've got threats as well. And we've got to make sure that we've got layers of defenses in place for these as well. What's critical about this is that we're also feeding in data from Defender and Purview. And so for local agent scenarios as well, I can layer in those detections, feed those into identity protection, and then stop token issuance, revoke the sessions, and be able to protect that agent until we're able to investigate and properly remediate any threats in the wild. Our risk engine utilizes aggregate risk in order to be able to make a real-time decision about what action needs to be taken as part of the definition that we set out in the risk-based conditional access that the identity administrator has defined. Each user has an aggregated risk level based on historical sign-in events and offline detections. Each sign-in that occurs is assessed for risk in real time based on multiple factors. We start with the user risk on the left-hand side. We may have multiple sign-ins that are happening in parallel across multiple applications, and one or multiple of those may result in risk events. We also may have risk events that come in after the fact. And when a sign-in risk is detected, it's logged as a risk event. The combination of multiple risk events over time affect the aggregate risk level of the user. And a risk detection with a high risk level signifies that Microsoft is highly confident that the account is compromised or will be compromised. And a risk level of low signifies that there are anomalies present in the sign-in or user's credential, but Microsoft is less confident that these anomalies mean that the account is compromised, but may be good signals and inputs for investigations that the SOC team is doing as they form more and more context around the user itself. Let's talk more about responding in real time with SOC insights from the SIEM and XDR integrations that we have. As I mentioned over and over, Identity security is a team sport, and it requires that your identity and SOC teams work hand in hand in order to ensure that we have the best, most comprehensive protections that prevent and disrupt attacks that are identity focused and identity centric. We must streamline identity security with built-in response, and we have to continuously optimize protection with a direct feedback loop. On the left-hand side, we've got the identity infrastructure. That's the first pillar that we think about in identity security. That's going to be all things related to the IAM, users and groups, access reviews, MFA, etc. Next, we'll move into the identity control plane. This is our zero trust engine or conditional access, and this feeds in all of the information from the identity infrastructure, but it also equally feeds in all of the information from across the threat landscape, from across the defenders, purview, network, etc., where we make real-time decisions that are able to prevent those attacks in real time. But we know that attacks are getting more complex in nature, and we have to have a comprehensive ITDR or identity threat detection and response story that allows our identity and SOC teams to work hand in hand and to close the loop every time when these threats occur. We do this in two main parts: unified visibility and autonomous response. Unified visibility allows us to take in information from across the hybrid landscape, across Entra and Active Directory, and the syncability between them so that we get a full picture of what the identity context looks like. But we also know that organizations are not that simple. You may have third-party identity infrastructure, you may have PAM, IGA providers, or you may be utilizing third-party SaaS applications. We want to bring all of that together for both the identity and SOC teams, but specifically in this case, for the SOC teams to get a holistic picture and then be able to make decisions based off of that. That might be response actions that allow us to disable all of the users at the same time with one click, or it may be autonomous response actions that use that same correlation and linked accounts to be able to take autonomous action at the time of threat. As I mentioned, when you bring together the identity infrastructure, the identity control plane, and ITDR, that really shows what Microsoft Identity Security is able to do in practice. We feed in information from identity infrastructure and the identity control plane that make up the visibility story, and then the visibility capabilities are utilized in the attack disruption in autonomous response, which runs 24/7 in order to be able to contain and evict the threat across all identity surfaces and perimeters. The amount of signals is not simply enough in today's fast-moving threat landscape that we see targeting identities every single day. Entra alone has over 1 billion users, and as part of that, we needed to think through how we bring actionable insights to both the identity and SOC teams. I want to share with you 3 key updates that we've made to our identity security story with Microsoft Entra ID Protection. The first one, we know attackers love to look for the seams in products when they're thinking about how they're going to attack an organization and take over an identity. We've enhanced our detections between Entra and Defender to be able to have the most comprehensive view on hybrid-based identity attacks. And that directly feeds in to our next section, which is the unified risk score. This is shared risk signals from Defender and Entra to improve accuracy in preventing attacks across conditional access. And the best part is you just get this capability as you add more defenders into your landscape. Finally, we've got interconnected experiences between the IAM and SOC teams because we need to play as a team. These shared user experiences, role-based access control or RBAC, and agentic workflows between IAM and SOC teams really empower us to do the best work possible, but also ensure that we can respond to threats effectively as the SOC and be able to close the loop back with the identity teams so that we can prevent future attacks from occurring. Our goal here is shift left as much as possible and prevent the next attack from ever occurring. And we bring this all together into a holistic ID protection dashboard where you can see trends, types of attacks, where your attacks are coming from across the world. And this gives you a really good visibility into where you need to focus your action, as well as improve your overall security posture. Because when we think about the IAM and SOC teams working together, we think about the identity team as defining policies, rolling out new changes, and constantly improving identity and security posture for your organization, like implementing phishing resistant authentication. The SOC team is going to be there to be able to correlate incidents, respond to incidents in cases, for example, and be able to take disruptive and responsive action natively in the IAM surface, as well as part of third-party integrations as well. AI allows for a paradigm shift to occur. Exponential gains in human expertise and efficiency to defend at machine speed and scale. We have to move from reactive to proactive because agents operate at machine speed. We have to move from siloed to integrated teams. As I've mentioned, the identity and SOC teams working closer than ever before, so there's no more ping-ponging of tickets that takes days and weeks to occur. We have to be thinking in seconds, minutes, and hours. We move away from static analysis and we move towards more of a dynamic model where we're constantly recalculating the threat surface so that we can recommend and implement the most comprehensive protection to prevent against those attacks to begin with. And there's no more manual. We have to be thinking automated. We have to be thinking about implementing these controls through policies and through autonomy with human in the loop in every step so that we're able to stop the threat from occurring, investigate, and then make it productive again. We're constantly balancing between security and productivity, and we do not want to sacrifice on either. Agents are empowering roles across security and IT in ways that we never thought possible. Take, for example, the Conditional Access Optimization Agent. This is part of the Microsoft Security Copilot, and what this allows us to do is be the constant monitor of all of our conditional access policies across not only risk-based, but also our policies that enforce MFA or block access for sensitive resources or enforce additional checks before a privileged role can be used, for example. But we've learned from organizations over time that it can be complex to have a full understanding of all of your policy landscapes and identifying where there may be gaps, for example. We think this is a really powerful capability because it continuously monitors your conditional access policies. It looks at sign-ins, it looks at posture, for example, and it will make recommendations about changes that you need to make in your policies or gaps that we've identified as part of your policies. Gaps in policies can mean that threat actors will utilize those holes to gain persistence within your organization. This is hypercritical that we've got an agent that is paired with a human to make these recommendations, create report-only policies that allow us to evaluate the effectiveness, and then eventually roll out those policies to protect that gap. The Conditional Access Optimization Agent is constantly evolving and recommending new policy types, like a risky agent, for example, so that your organization has comprehensive coverage that's staying up to date with threats as they occur. We've covered human, non-human, and agent identity-based protection today. Entra ID Protection is our prevention engine that we utilize at global scale to protect and prevent against identity-based compromise and takeover. Microsoft sees identity security as three key pillars: the IAM infrastructure, the control plane, and ITDR. These all have to work interconnected and together because the best possible way of preventing identity-based compromise and identity-based threats is to work as a team. The IAM and SOC teams have to work closer than ever so that we can operate at machine speed, utilizing agents to augment the work that we're doing, but still have human in the loop in every step of the equation. The IAM team is going to build policies and roll out new capabilities, adopt better and stronger security posture, whereas the SOC team is going to respond to those continuous threats, tune, and help to train us so that we're able to prevent those next attacks and close the loop every time an attack occurs. We've put together a comprehensive identity protection report where we go over the trends and data behind today's conversation. This new report from Microsoft Entra lays out what's changing in access security and what leaders should prioritize next. We really appreciate the time that you've taken today to watch our webinar, and we hope you've learned more about Microsoft's approach to identity security and how IAM and SOC teams must operate as a team in order to be able to prevent attacks from yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Thank you so much.